introduction. And yes, hello everyone. My name is Huai-an, and I'm a joint PhD student of Dr. Xin Fu and Dr. Miao Pan. Welcome to my PhD defense. First of all, I want to thank all my defense committee, Dr. Mayerich, Dr. Guo, Dr. Wang, Dr. Fu, and Dr. Pan, those participate in today's defense. So my dissertation topic is fast and federated, heterogeneity-aware, delay-efficient federal learning over mobile devices. So I will begin with the introduction of why I'm doing all of my works, and then follow up by 3 of my works throughout the past few years. In the era of big data, the artificial intelligence, which is AI, has gained attention as a powerful tool for utilizing those data. A key technique within the AI is the deep learning, such known as DL, which enables models to learn from data and perform a wide range of tasks. This approach has been applied in many areas, including the ones you see at the screen. We have healthcare, we have smartphones, and virtual augmented reality. However, the AI faces some challenges where the traditional deep learning, they typically require collecting data from user devices to centralized servers for training. And considering the distributed nature of data across many edge devices, the centralized data collection is not only impractical, but also has privacy issues inside them. So to address these problems, the federated learning has been proposed as a decentralized learning framework that enables training across multiple devices without transferring raw data. So instead, only the model parameters are shared, which helps preserve the data privacy while making use of distributed data sources. We can basically describe the process of learning into 4 steps. The first is server sends the global models to the clients. The clients train the downloaded model on corresponding data to get the local models. They send back their new local model back to the server, and the server will aggregate and perform fed average among all those new local model parameters and create a new global model. In the field of multi-access edge computing architecture, it actually fits perfectly in supporting federated learning. The server and the mobile network can broadcast the model parameters to devices for the local model training using those local data. After the training, the devices upload the model updates back to the server. So this is really suitable for an environment if we use the mobile network to do such sort of federated learning framework. So currently, we already have numerous federated learning applications, such as the healthcare. We have the Google Assistant. We have smart architecture, signal detection, which is useful in autonomous driving, and also smart medical with VR. So there are more applications that are coming up in the future with the help of federated learning. In the recent years, the federated learning has extended beyond the centralized settings to make use of the mobile devices. This transition has been made possible by the improvements in hardware. So with the increasing computing resources, and this is a chart of showing how the different devices have grown in terms of computing capability. And also the growth of access to the real-life data. With the support of huge amount of data, the mobile device can drive machine learning to the edge. In this following figure, we show that there are already on-device training or inference performing on those devices that we use in the lab. So in summary, the federated learning over mobile devices has some advantages compared to traditional FL, which is much more convenient and much more adequate and constant data support, and also comparable inference speed. However, the one potential downside for this is the slow training time. So where does this slow training time come from? Now we want to talk about the reason is the heterogeneous device setups. So let's say that we have different kinds of computing capability across different devices. Here, I just use an example of the devices I use to train the federated learning in our lab. So from left to right, we have Raspberry Pi, Nano, TX2, and Xavier. So from left to right, it is from slow to fast computing speed. And also, we have the different communication resources in our daily lives. We have Bluetooth, 4G LTE, and also Wi-Fi 5. And also from left to right is from slow to fast. So with only the computing capability and the communication resource, it's going to create a big discrepancy in terms of training time among devices. So what does that lead to? So the device heterogeneity here, or the system heterogeneity, leads to the straggler issue, as told here. The straggler is basically the slow training clients in the federated learning. Let's take an example of federated learning for ResNet 20 at CFAR 10. So we have all different kinds of devices. The top two devices are the Jetson Nano, which is slower than the bottom two devices in TX2. We also have the 4G, which is much slower than the Wi-Fi 5. So in terms of the training time, you can see that the top device and the bottom device has a difference of over 2.15 times of discrepancy, and the slow device is always going to be a training bottleneck in all the in your training round. So it's going to waste a lot of time for waiting those stragglers to finish their training. So how do we address the straggler issue is the main focus of my dissertation. In my work, I have gone to two paths. The first kind of work is work one, which is task offloading from slow devices to fast devices. This is helped by doing the concept of fast helps slow, or the rich helps the poor, for example. And for the other two works, work number 2 and 3, my path is to ensure that the proper subnetwork assignment from the server. For example, if we have a full model, we want to assign the proper subnetwork size based on the capability of different workers or different devices. So that will be the end of my introduction. Now I'll be talking about the detailed works of my the 3 works that I will be showing later. The first one being DAFL, which is device-to-device transmission for delayed efficient federated learning over mobile devices. So the work one motivation here is for fast devices to help the slow devices. Basically, you can see this boy represents a straggler or slow devices, and the girl represents the fast devices. Then here we can see the fast devices help by taking off some of the burden of the slow devices. The 3 questions we want to ask here is, how do we actually help those stragglers to compute? The second question is, who do we ask for help? And the last question is, with a large number of devices, how do we help all the stragglers? The first question is, how do we help those stragglers compute? So I'm going to give an example of the split learning technique, which is basically you try to divide a full model into 2 parts, namely one of the client-side model or the server-side model, because originally this is done between client and servers. So server here represent a much faster device here. So the concept here is we want the server to help client perform part of the training with the other half of the model. So let's say we have an input data here, and it goes through the first half propagation. This is known as a smash data when it goes through the transmission to the server side. So now we go to the second half propagation to the output layer of the server, and then we do the backward propagation all the way back to the client itself. So as you can see here, part of the training is done by the server-side model right here, thanks to the help of the split learning. So the question is, why do we not just ask server for help? Because server is clearly supposed to be the fastest computing device outside of the clients. However, I'm going to dig deep into what is applying split learning between server and straggler is going to represent. The first is, obviously, it will massively reduce the computing time overall. Secondly, it will actually significantly increase the communication time. The reason is because the split learning is a constant transmission of the smash data, and it's going to have a lot of communication time consumed. Thus, this sort of work is actually not suitable for communication time bottleneck training. So the training time, what we assume is that it is mostly bottlenecked by the communication time due to the slow transmission speed for the common communication tools. Like right now, the fastest we can get is mostly Wi-Fi, which is still not fast enough. So our solution is we try to find a new communication tool between the devices. With that said, I will introduce the D2D transmission known as the device-to-device transmission. Here are some examples. For example, AirDrop or Wi-Fi Direct are a part of this category. So the concept of D2D transmission, it is a relatively fast and direct transmission between two devices. As you can see, here is a chart a table showing that the right part, which is the Wi-Fi Direct, is significantly faster than the other existing transmission types. However, the limitation to use such sort of D2D transmission, one of them is usually this is a one-to-one transmission, so it cannot connect to multiple devices at the same time. Second limitation is that it actually is restricted by the transmission distance. You cannot expect all the devices to connect if they are too far away. With those two limitations, then only the mobile devices that are near the straggler may satisfy the limitations, and we also usually will assume that server is too far away for those devices to connect. So as to getting help as a straggler, every having a straggler to say, can someone help me? He first reaches the server, and because the distance is too far away, the server rejects the request. And also it reaches out to another fast device, but also it is still too far away for them to help. We try to connect to a device within the range, but this device doesn't really have the luxury to help out your straggler, your straggler parameters. And lastly, they reach out to one of the devices that is close enough and also fast enough to help you perform part of the split learning. So with that said, now we can replace the split learning with the server side. We replace it with a faster device side. And now the names are changed to the weak side model and the strong side model. So what is this benefit for us? It not only reduces the computing time due to the split learning, it also has a transmission issue mitigated due to the new D2D transmission we applied between those devices. Third question is, how do we help all the stragglers right here? Let's say we have a fast device here. He tries to help others, and there are multiple stragglers devices waiting to be assisted. We also have the normal devices who just want to mind their own business, and other fast devices to do so. So what is the perfect pair for all those devices among them? So who should I help, basically? And now we would talk about the way to help is to pair up the devices with the help of marriage matching. So the simple example is, let's here we have a 2D map here. We have 4 devices. The darker color means how faster the devices are. So we use a stable marriage matching plus with the help of the transmission distance DTH, as I show right here. So the original 2 sides, the basic concept of marriage matching was about how to pair up boys and girls and to find the simple pair, or like the suboptimal but efficient pairs to form out different people. And here, instead of boys and girls, we split the device into 2 sides, which is the slow devices U1 and U2, and the fast devices K1 and K2. So the preference list is as follows. So let's say we start from U1. U1 is trying to prioritize within the range as K1 and K2, and he wants to prioritize the faster device. So here the order is K1 over K2. So the faster the better. And the other example is that U2, which unfortunately he doesn't have the distance to reach to the K1. So the preference is only K2, being K1 too far away. So with that, the final device pairs will be as follows, where U1 it will be paired up with K1 and U2 will paired up with K2. So with that, we've essentially solved the 3 questions I just mentioned there, so that we pair up the devices. So to combine the D2D and split learning, the proposed work is basically the D2D assisted parallel learning, which is DAFL, where we pair out the client devices where each of the between the devices, they will perform the split learning with the help of D-to-D transmission. And to talk about the advantages of DAFL to compare with existing works, so let's say we do another example, one round of fair learning. Now, the federal average time, it has both the long computing time and the long communication time due to the stragglers. As for the split learning, it has a shorter computing time, but actually longer communication time due to the constant transmission. However, with the help of D-to-D transmission, now our work is significantly shorter in terms of communication time. So you can see here the benefit for DFL not only decrease the computing time, but also the communication time. So let's take a look at the DFL over mobile device testbed. We have the experimental setup of RTX 8000. The mobile devices we use are Jetson TX2 and Jetson Severe. The network connection, we use Wi-Fi 5, and the platform is PyTorch. The measure we want to use is the total training time to target accuracy, with the baseline being fed average, the traditional fed learning, split fed learning plus split learning, DAFL random, which basically says that our work with plus the work of random client selection. And DFL time is basically saying that we add client selection by selecting the clients that are usually faster in the training. So the DFL results on the performance analysis, we want to compare with the fed average split learning and SFL, split learning plus fed learning. So as you can see here, the graph here, the purple and the green one shows is our two DFL results. As you can see, the DFL, our final one, which is the purple one, it takes less training time to reach the target accuracy with a ratio of 1.38 to 1.77. And also, DAFL with the time-based client selection is better than the random client selection, as you can see here in the comparison between the purple curve and the green curve. As in results in different space sparsity, we also perform it on different kind of the size of the room, let's say. So we have a normal size room, we have a sparse room, which is a wider room. We have a dense room, which is much more crowded. So devices are more likely to be paired out and less being left behind with a dense room. So therefore, our work has a better performance in those dense areas. As you can see in the graph, the transmission time is slightly it is much slower than in the purple line. So that will conclude my first work of DAFL, and now I will talk about second work, which is WhaleFL, the wireless and heterogeneity aware latency efficient fair learning over mobile devices via adaptive subnetwork scheduling. As I mentioned before, the work 2 is basically to assign the proper subnetwork from server to the clients here. So the questions I want to ask here is, what is the subnetwork training and what is its advantage? What are the issues in the current subnetwork training methods? The third one is, how do we address these issues? First is, what is subnetwork training? So basically is each client trains a reduced portion of the full neural network, namely the subnetwork. Here we show a picture of indicating what this means. We have the large cloud server, which have the full size model, and we have the bottom 3 devices with different tiers from left to right is from low capability to high capability. So here, let's say the lowest device, we only assign P equals 0.2. That means we only have 20% of the parameters being used in this model. And also for the middle one, we use 60% of the model. And for the fastest device, we use the full model. So basically, this is a way for those strugglers, namely the lower tier devices, to have less memory and less training delay and less burden for them. So here we have an example of devices TX2, just in TX2, and we can see the difference between a full network and a subnetwork. You have a big difference in terms of parameters, and in that result we have relatively low computing and communication time. The second question is what are the issues for the current subnetwork methods. So the first one is being the unawareness of the system dynamics, being the computing and communication. So let's say we have devices, they are basically the same capability. They're all, for example, iPhone 14. But even if those devices are the same, they will still have different kinds of computing capability based on their circumstances and different communication based on their wireless protocol. So let's say we have device 1 and device 2, where the first device, 30% of the CPU resource is being occupied by other background applications. Device 2 has 70% being occupied. This can be an example of, for example, the first person maybe just listening to Apple Music, while the second person is not only driving, he's also listening to Spotify, and he's also playing an online small mini game or something. But overall, you can see the different computing capabilities may change across the training. As for the communication, it is also a similar issue where the second device maybe he's using the Wi-Fi 5. It has a relatively powerful communication condition, while the 4G LTE is much slower speed, so that is going to affect the transmission time of the training. The second one is the awareness of the further learning training dynamics. Here we see a graph here. This is basically showing that during those different kinds of training, the training stage, you can actually have different kinds of efficiency on them. For the early stage, basically any training can contribute, so it's not really that important to serve that much information. However, during the critical stage, we require more accurate training to converge. And for the end stage, maybe the training is mostly done, so it has sufficient contributions and the slow accuracy increase to follow up. This sort of scenario, we call it the Fisher information, which is a measurement of determining the learning capability of the learning process. Namely, if the Fisher information is higher, that means that your training is going to be more efficient during that time. So the question is, how do we utilize such information? Yes, so that follows up with the question 3, how to capture and utilize those dynamics. We have the proposed method of wireless and heterogeneity aware FL, namely the WHALE FL. We are aware of the both system and learning training dynamics with the system efficiency and training efficiency utility function designed. We also assign different adaptive subnetwork to each client. This is with the help of the utility value to subnetwork size conversion. Our last, we basically talk about the contribution of this source is to have adaptive subnetwork scheduling to enhance its, my bad, the typo, both training delay and the accuracy. So let's take a look at the WHALE FL design review. Let's say overview. So let's say we have a device. This is a cell phone, and it has a device I. And the process here is as follows. First, we want to collect the Fisher information and also the training time of the system, and namely the computing time and the transmission time all together. Then we will perform the utility calculation by collecting those Fisher information and those training delays, and we can run over this selection utility function, which is UTIL, where the B basically stands for the batch for the device I. And the second part, we will do the subnetwork size conversion, where we actually use those utility function and transform them into the actual subnetwork sizes, ranging from the value of 0 to 1. And with that, having the converged subnetwork size, they can perform the local subnetwork training. As the fourth part, we will perform the global model aggregation, where all devices, they will collect, the server will collect the subnetwork among all the devices, and then they would perform the aggregation and generate a new global model. So let's take a deep discussion of what each of those means. So the first one is that each client, we obtain the local information info and the computing and transmission time. Let's say here we have bigger picture of showing what's going on, basically you can see here we're trying to indicate that the person runs fast when it's the local facial information is relatively high. So that way, if we have more subnetwork size in there, it's going to help the training. So the obtained values is the first feature information, which is the learning capability of the file learning process for client I. As for the other two is the computation time and the transmission time, which is the total training time for client I at round R. The Huai-an utility function calculation is also motivated by the client selection paper ORT for OSDI, which is we split the utility function into two parts. The first part being the transmission training efficiency utility, which is determined by the feature information. And we have the system efficiency utility, which is determined by the computing and transmission time. So let's take a better look of this entire graph. So here we have the big T, which is the developer preferred duration, which will be may vary from different training tasks. So let's say here if we have a higher feature information, namely this value is higher, that means that we need more training at that time. So we will assign larger utility value inside there. And on the other hand, if it's a longer training time, for example, these red and blue, it means that the overall device is slower. That means that we will want to assign smaller utility value. So that's why the feature information is proportional to the utility function, while the training time it is the opposite. After we've done the utility calculation, we want to normalize the utility function into UNR. The N stands for the normalization. It's not a variable. So UNIR will equal to utility function out of UTH, where UTH is the full size model threshold. And we also want to derive the UNIR into the W hat IR, which basically it gives us a much clearer discrete value for those different subnetwork sizes. We can see an example right here. Based on the normalized utility value, we assign different size subnetworks. As you can see here, we have the normalized UNIR from 0 to 1. Then in that sense, the lowest UN, you will get the smallest subnetwork size. And from that, we will go higher to W3, W2, finally W1. So this is how we get the actual subnetwork sizes of those devices. The other one is the local training and global model aggregation. So after each client will train their local subnetwork with the assigned subnetwork size, and the server will aggregate the subnetworks from the clients using the concept basically similar to fit average. So here, how do we actually aggregate those subnetworks with basically different structures? Here, that you can see, the first part of aggregation, where it's only the left side of all of the subnetworks, we will collect from all three devices because all three of them have them. So we will compute all of those. And then the middle part, which only the device I and device N have them. So we only aggregate these two parts. As for the third one, we only have the last device have those. So we will aggregate them the last. So in that sense, we will get a new global model with the aggregation of all those three different devices. So with the comparison between the HeteroFL and the Huai-an is that first, the HeteroFL, both of them are subnetwork extraction methods. And HeteroFL, while it uses a mask capability, the Huai-an actually acknowledges the different states of the devices. And therefore, they assign adaptive utility to them to satisfy the different circumstances of the Federated training. And with that as a result, usually Huai-an would sometimes have a smaller subnetwork size in comparison to HeteroFL. So here, the training time for HeteroFL is longer, while the Huai-an is shorter. And in terms of the rounds to convergence, the HeteroFL is first turns less to converge because it has a larger size, while the whale FL has a little slightly higher, more rounds to converge. However, as we know, training time is equal to training time per round times the rounds convergence. The final convergence speed is actually whale FL still faster than the Hydro FL. So overall, our work is shown to be efficient and it is beneficial to the subnetwork the size assignment. Okay, so with that, we have now go to our whale FL testbed. With our experimental setup, we have Edge server RTX 3090, and this time we have 5 types of mobile devices: Raspberry Pi, Jetson Nano, Jetson TX2, Severe, and the MacBook Pro to kind of make up the environment, the environment that has many different heterogeneous devices around. And also we use the Pi platform PyTorch. So let's see here the latency, efficiency, and learning performances. We propose whale FL with the comparison of Fed average and Hydra FL. So let's say we have all those 4 different tasks from CNN MNIST, ResNet 18, Transformer, and the HAR, which is human activity recognition. So as you can see, our task is ranging from CV to natural language processing, and also human activity recognition, all those different tasks. So we reduces the training time per round, as I mentioned before, and we slightly increase the training rounds of convergence. And the clients will train adaptive subnetworks with more efficient than the fixed size subnetworks. As you can see, the green curve is our work proposed as compared to the red curve, which is Hydra FL. We can see that our work is faster in reaching those convergence compared to the Hydra FL. While for federated learning, because federated learning usually is just training with the full subnetwork, so with the full network, so it is reasonable that the final accuracy is still higher than us, but at the same time, we still converge much faster than them. So in terms of the system efficiency versus the training efficiency, we compare the system efficiency only or the training efficiency only method. Here, the green line is our default setting. The blue one is only the training efficiency utility, and the red one is only the system efficiency utility. The system efficiency has faster convergence, as you can see here in the blue curve, while for the training efficiency, it has a better final accuracy in terms of the final result. As for, we can say that the whale FL converges faster than the training efficiency. You can see the green is much faster than the blue curve. And also the whale FL has a better accuracy than system efficiency only. You can see that the final accuracy of green curve is also better than red curve. So to sum up, the conclusion for this one is that the green one with both the consideration of system efficiency and training efficiency has a much more balanced version of them all. The speed of accuracy improvement is done by us applying the whale adaptive subnetwork scheduling on the existing subnetwork methods. We have Hydra FL, Fed Rolex, and Fed Dropout. So we can say that integrating whale into those existing subnetwork approaches enhances both the training delay and the accuracy. Here we can see a chart across the different kinds of tasks from CV, NLP, HAR. We have the methods of whale versus Hydra FL. We have whale Rolex versus Fed Rolex. We have whale dropout versus Fed dropout. All of them have significant speed up and also have an increase in accuracy. Okay, so the next word I want to talk about is the STARS FL, which is my final work. So the shortcomings in the existing subnetwork here is first the unawareness of the local spatial domain in subnetworks, and also the awareness of the global temporal domain in the federating process. So with this third work, I'm still in the direction of the subnetwork extraction. So in that sense, I will kind of skip over the the introduction to the subnetwork, and we just jump to what are the things that we can still improve as a subnetwork extraction method. So let's take an example of the local spatial domain. Let's say we have the example of ResNet 18 model with 4 convolution layers, 0.5 as a subnetwork size. So let's take a look at the full model. Basically means that it is not a subnetwork. It is the full is 1.0, and the fixed ratio is all of them has the ratio of 0.5 as their subnetwork size. While the spatial aware, you can see there's actually a difference in terms of the final convolution layer here, where some neurons are actually missing. So this can be seen as the layer, as a chart, as a table right here. As you can see, full model is all 1.0, fixed ratio is 0.5, and the spatial aware, it is 0.25 on the last convolution layer. So what does that even mean? After this, we kind of try to test out the performance of those things, of the spatial aware. And it turns out the spatial aware has a significant decrease in the parameter size. So that's going to decrease the transmission time. Also, it has also a decent improvement in terms of reducing the flops. So that's also going to improve the computation time as well. As for the local accuracy, as we can see, it doesn't actually drop that much, merely dropping 0.4, which is usually negligible in most of the subnetwork criteria. So as you can see, there are still some rooms for the subnetworks to reduce the neurons or the parameters in those deeper layers. The second shortcoming in existing subnetwork training is the awareness of the global temporal domain. So in the last work, we kind of talked about the concept of Fisher information. The higher, that means that the faster, the more efficient your system will be going. But in here, we also show that the Fisher information may also be used to determine whether the federated brain process is under the CLP, which is the critical learning period. In this figure, we can see that the test accuracy significantly increases during the CLP when the Fisher rate is high. So as you can see here, the blue curve represents the Fisher information, and when it's high, it is also equivalent to the orange area where CLP is during the CLP. So as here, we were trying to say that assigning more work during the CLP while conserving the resources during the non-CLP and fair learning process may increase the time efficiency of training. So our last work is proposed as STARS FL, which is the aware of the local spatial domain of subnetwork with the help of layer-wise specific wide adjustments design. We are also aware of the global temporal domain of the fair learning process, which is the global Fisher information characterized training dynamics design. We combine the both spatial and temporal awareness to create the spatial and temporal aware subnetwork reconfiguration. So this is really similar to the subnetwork extraction, but now we're in a different approach to be aware of both local and the local spatial and the global temporal domain. So let's take the STARS FL design overview. Let's say that we have all those 3 devices. We have a watch, we have a cell phone, we also have a laptop right here. So these have different kinds of capabilities. The first thing of this framework is that it does the subnetwork initialization, where all devices are initialized at a given subnetwork size. Because it's a watch, that is going to be assigned with the smaller subnetwork size, and the middle one is going to be a middle subnetwork size, and the laptop is going to assign a full network. So, and the next part we want to do is do the local subnetwork training, is obviously being done with all the fair learning procedures here. But instead of only transmitting the weight, which is the WRI, we actually also want to collect the Fisher information from all those local devices. So what the server side does is that we try to do a global model aggregation, where we also aggregate the subnetworks from all those devices, and then we also collect all these different Fisher informations from the device. And the next we want to do is after we collect the Fisher information, we would perform a temporal aware subnetwork reconfiguration where we determine by the with the collected Fisher information, we determine if this at this stage is it a CLP? Is it a critical learning period? If it is, we will perform the subnetwork expansion. If it's not, we will perform the subnetwork size shrinkage. So let's say this work on the Fisher information is high, so it's a CLP. We choose to expand the size, and it's going to be sent back to the devices with a relatively larger subnetwork size. However, we still have something to do with the local spatial aware reconfiguration. So instead of just sending it back plain as the server had sent back, we can also actually get another discount or another reduction in terms of the parameters being chosen here. So let's say I take a look at this red graph where we can see that the top layer is reduced from 4 neurons to 3 neurons, and the second one is reduced from 2 neurons to 1 neuron. And the same goes for the blue device here. You can see the top layer reduced from 5 to 4, the second layer reduced from 3 to 2. And for the full model, we will just leave it as the same. So after this, we will do another round of the local subnetwork training, and we also will collect a new round of subnetworks and also the new rounds of Fisher information. So let's dig deep into all of those different tasks. We will start with the local SA subnetwork reconfiguration. The goal of the spatial awareness is we want to cut down the redundant parameters in each layer to reduce the computing and communication delay without compromising the accuracy. So let's say if the size wants to increase here. So here we can say that this the triangle delta W is it means that the plus, it means that the subnetwork expansion rate here. So we can see the minimize over the left side, which is form of alpha, and the right side is a fixed ratio increase size. So let's assume that if we have no spatial awareness, then it's always going to choose the triangle one. So what does alpha means? Alpha actually here stands for the number of the ratio of parameters you have in this particular layer. So if I have a larger alpha, that means this layer is more parameter dense, and therefore it's going to cost a larger cost in terms of the transmission. So these layers are more likely to be moderated. Let's give an example through the figure. Say we have a subnetwork with the 4 layers being the ratio of 0.25. If we go through the fixed ratio, then we just simply add 0.25 with just the fixed ratio increase size. So we've increased it from 0.25 to 0.5. As for the spatial aware, we basically want to increase less of the assign size. So instead of adding 0.25, we actually only add 0.125 at the last layer. To say about another case is to talk about when the size decreases. So here you can see is replaced by another one where the fixed ratio is still really similar. But let's take a look at if the layers start from 1.0. If the fixed ratio, then we only decrease by 0.5 in each layer, while in the spatial aware layers, we would kind of decrease more in those dense parameter layers, which is the last layer. Instead of 0.5, we decrease more to 0.625. So in that sense, the final layer is going to be the last layer of this subnetwork is going to be 0.375. So with that, the local spatial awareness is how much do we want to increase or decrease? But we haven't talked about how do we actually determine if we decrease or increase. This will be the help of the global temporal aware subnetwork reconfiguration. So the goal of temporal awareness is do you want to assign the proper subnetwork size according to the training dynamics of the federated learning process. So the global feature information here, we want to be the indicator of training dynamics. So let's say we have a curve right here. This is showing that at different rounds, the different training dynamics. This training dynamics, it is followed by this formulation right here. Basically, you can see it is the square square root mean of the Fisher information. So basically, it is really proportional to the Fisher information as well. So here, with the training dynamics, it is higher than the specific threshold, then it is going to be a critical learning period. So as you can see here, if TDR exceeds the threshold, then we will do the size expansion. On the other hand, if it's lower than it, then we would do the size shrinkage. And with that, we have the combined result of spatial aware and temporal aware. And now let's actually talk about how do we assign those stragglers inside those devices. So the goal here is to account for the stragglers in federated learning over those heterogeneous devices, which is the main goal of my dissertation. So the subnetwork size change for the L layer on the client I on run hour, you can see here, this formulation is actually just a recap of those other of the slides before. So the first two part is whether we choose the amount to decrease or increase. So this is basically belong to the local spatial awareness. As for the TDR, it is belong to the global temporal awareness to whether it increase or decrease. To create a straggler resilient subnetwork size, we will add this part, which is the T bar over Ti, and this new formulation here. So let's say if we're a straggler, that means we have a larger Ti. If a larger Ti, that means it's going to be a smaller T bar over Ti. Here, the T bar is essentially means the average training time. Okay, so if you are a straggler, then this is basically the T bar over Ti is going to be less than 1. So if it's less than 1, what's going to happen? When the size increases, namely when the signal function is over 0, then we will limit the width expansion to prevent the excessive burden. On the other hand, if the size decreases, where the signal function is less than 0, we will reduce the width shrinkage in order for the faster devices to maintain a balanced contribution over this. So in this work, we established that we use the awareness of the local spatial awareness and the global temporal awareness, and the help of the straggler resilient design here, we can assign more efficient subnetwork training with the awareness of device heterogeneity or system heterogeneity. For our comparison, we take a look at Federated average, HeteroFL, and stars FL, where we can see here the stars FL is adaptive aware width and in comparison to the HeteroFL of the fixed ratio. And in that sense, our training time is actually shorter. And also we have a much higher convergence speed. Let's take a look at the stars FL test bed here. So we can see here, we also have the similar setup as before, where we have all those different clients as our roles, and we also have the NVIDIA RTX 3090 as our server. We also have assigned for different transmission rates to simulate the environment. The latency and the efficiency and the learning performance here is there we compare with the Fed average and HeteroFL, which is always trained on the subnetwork fixed ratio. We have trained these results on different setups. And in that sense, we say that reduce the training time per round. We also can train adaptive subnetworks. It is more efficient those fixed size networks. Our work is faster in reaching those convergence with the ratio of 1.2 to 2.8. As for the ablation study, we try to look at the impact of spatial awareness and temporal awareness. So let's say we have the default setting of stars FL. We want to compare with stars FL, which is without temporal aware. We have the TARS FL without the spatial aware. As you can see here, we also train it across different tasks here. The downside for SARS FL is that we cannot adjust the size according to the training phase. Therefore, it's going to be reach a lower accuracy. In terms of the TARS FL, we cannot really reduce the redundant parameters in those high communication. So the conclusion for here is that we observe and study the system heterogeneity for learning over mobile devices. We first were introduced DFL that developed the D2D assisted split learning between device pairs for delay efficient fed learning. We have the Whale FL to develop system and training efficiency aware adaptive subnetwork scheduling. With the last work, with the help of spatial and temporal aware, we have created a new subnetwork reconfiguration for convergence speedup for learning. And the next one is our future work, where I talk about what is our next goal. So currently, I'm more deep into the subnetwork field of things. So I want to see if we can have more impact by getting a more fine-grained subnetwork extraction for the latency speedup. So as I've done the research so far we know I discovered that most fed learning subnetwork extractions are the channel pruning method. We'll take a look at this chart, this figure of showing different kinds of pruning methods. So the unpruned original model and the filter and channel pruning. This is similar to the Hydra FL and Whale FL, Stars FL. The last one is the kernel pruning, which is more fine-grained, as you can see, than the filter channel pruning. As for the left two ones, they are in the structure of dense CNN. So they are more hardware friendly because all their devices, all the parameters, you won't skip those devices during those training. As for the kernel pruning one, it is a sparse CNN, which is hardware unfriendly. So we actually have another type of convolution, which is the group convolution. The group kernel convolution, which is both hardware friendly and fine-grained, where the concept for this is you assign those kernel into different groups, and then you kind of compress it into all those different types of dense networks. So this is a really similar structure as to the channel pruning, and therefore it's going to be more hardware friendly. Our concept is that what if we try to add the group kernel pruning on top of the channel pruning and to do it inside a fair learning setup, where we want to create further channel pruning with the group kernel pruning. What's that going to happen is that we're going to select parts of the group kernel pruning into a smaller type of group of subnetworks. So in that sense, we may be able to further increase and to further reduce the computing or the transmission time while not sacrificing that much accuracy. So this is my publications of what my accepted and published works, and also some of them are under the review currently. And that'll be all for my defense. Thank you all for listening, and I'm open to any questions.
Any questions from the committee members?
Yeah, maybe I can start. Yeah. Good presentation. So can you go back to the slide 35?
35, okay.
Yes.